What About Vietnam? A podcast with Gary Newsom. The series where Curry talks with travellers about their experiences and adventures. Find out more about Vietnam from the people who have actually been there.
What about Vietnam?
Whether it's adventure, exploring the culture and cuisine, shopping, or just soaking up the sun. Let Carrie and her travellers pave the way for a magical holiday in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?
Xin chào and welcome to What About Vietnam. Today's episode, we're going to be talking to Michael Tatarski in Ho Chi Minh City. Michael is Editor-in-Chief of Saigon, the Vietnamese culture and history website, and author of the Vietnam Weekly newsletter. Michael has been instrumental in keeping many of us informed about the COVID spread in Vietnam and just the devastation it has caused in Saigon in particular. I feel very privileged to have him on to give us some local insights, but also to give us some insights into just how it has affected the population of Saigon, what the COVID lockdown restrictions has actually meant at a street level and what that's been like to, not leave your building and things like that. And the other reason I'm really glad to have him on to talk about this in an authoritative way is because I think we're going to be drawing some comparisons in years to come from episodes like this, recording this in real time. This is October 2021. And, I think we're going to be looking at Vietnam in new lights and new ways in years to come, when we will be able to say, especially for people like myself who can draw history in various visits back and forth over the last 14 years, just to compare changes, new initiatives, things that have eventuated due to the pandemic, good and bad. So it's great to have Michael on. I hope you enjoy this episode and can take on the information knowing that the lockdown restrictions are going to be easing on the 1st of October. This episode will be going up that week. So let's cross fingers that Vietnam is starting to turn a corner and seeing some light on the other side for travellers. Please welcome Michael to the program. Michael, it's great to have you on the show.
Sure, no problem.
How are you
doing? Doing all right. I mean, we're well over 3 months, I think about 3.5 months of hard lockdown here in Ho Chi Minh City. But I mean, we'll get into this more, but it looks like some relief is finally on the horizon on Friday. I don't know exactly when this will come out, but Friday, October 1st, it looks like there's going to be big changes finally.
Maybe if you could be descriptive to my listeners, just, talking about what it's been like. You are living in Saigon, working in Saigon, so you're right in the thick of it. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what the last 90 days in Saigon's been like.
Sure. It's been, with the caveat that I'm lucky. I've had steady work. I'm able to work from home comfortably. Don't have to worry about how am I going to pay for my next meal and that kind of stuff. So there's certainly those comforts, but it's been tough. There's no other way to put it. The strict lockdown began. I want to say it was July 9th, but early July. And these rules that are called Directive 16, being able to go out for essential items and things like that, which we had for a period in 2020 in March and April, kind of really early in the pandemic. But it was still, you were still able to exercise outside and that sort of thing. Granted, the case numbers were in the hundreds at that point.
Extremely low.
Yeah. And here in Ho Chi Minh City, this outbreak really exploded and we were hitting, 8,000, 9,000 cases a day, which for Vietnam is a lot, to put it mildly. So that went into effect and they banned all food delivery as well, and also all outdoor exercise. So, which kind of caught a lot of people by surprise. So that meant, cooking every meal for about 3 months. They did relax food delivery a couple of weeks ago, which was really, really nice. I mean, it's good for businesses to finally get some income again, and great for people to not have to cook all the time. So that, and then, not being able to go outside. I mean, it's not, I know some of the international coverage has been a little, maybe overdone a bit. I mean, a month ago, they did bring in the military or some elements of it to support the lockdown when, the situation became really extreme in the public health sense. I mean, the hospital system was on the verge of collapse. Almost 300 deaths a day just in the city. They had to build almost 20 field hospitals to handle all of the cases. I mean, it was an absolute crisis. I mean, this was, I would have to say, probably the worst situation to hit the city since the war ended, or at least in, 30 years or something like that. So it was, I mean, there's no doubt about it. It was extremely serious. But even with the military coming in, there weren't like soldiers at the corner of your street, like making sure you didn't leave the house. You could at least walk outside your gate, but there was nowhere to go. Everything was closed. And I mean, you really shouldn't have been out on the streets. It wasn't safe. The virus was, and remains really widespread. I mean, vaccination rates are higher now, thankfully. So it's less of a risk if you're vaccinated to be out. But yeah, just week after week of, just being at home, which again, if you're like me and you can work from home is frustrating, but you'll get by. But for a lot of people, which I know we'll get to, it's absolutely devastating. I mean, for that to go that long without work.
Absolutely.
Food supplies were a real issue for a lot of people, especially, for a long time in lockdown, we couldn't even go grocery shopping. So you had to get it delivered. Some of that was through a government system. Some of it was through, privately owned supermarkets that eventually got their own systems figured out. But a lot of people are still, going hungry. Like food supply has been a real problem.
Yeah. And the government did step in there for a bit and was handing out small sums of money to the poor so that they could get a basic meal. Because I guess for people listening, Saigon is so densely populated, and the food industry or the street food industry is huge. Mm-hmm. It is a and like you and I were laughing before about, having to cook meals. It's a city where you don't cook yourself that often because it's often cheaper to eat out.
Yeah.
So all of those very small vendors, lost their patronage, and they kind of packed up their stuff and were, had nowhere to go. And they were trying to leave the city and I think take some comfort by heading home to the rural areas where the virus wasn't. And, just refuge at home, I think, until it all went away.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, if people aren't familiar with the cities, know that, they say the population is around 9 or 10 million, but I think it's widely assumed that that's off by several million potentially. I mean, there's a huge population of migrant workers, people who have moved here. I mean, this is the economic engine of the country. This and a couple of neighboring provinces. So a huge draw from provinces where there's less economic activity and less development. And a lot of these workers, I mean, you mentioned cooking, like a lot of them, it's not that they're not able to cook, it's that they can't. They live in tiny shared homes or, tenement buildings that don't have kitchens or very limited kitchens.
Facilities, or gas.
So when and their job is, working at a construction site or something like that. And when that all gets shut down, that's all there is for them.
And I understood, the hospital system obviously was not able to cope. And, I've got some other friends in Saigon and, they were talking about that hotels were commissioned and some offices were commissioned to put together kind of makeshift hospital rooms to cater to some of the patients. And, they were selling oxygen and things like that was kind of a priority for people. Did you hear similar? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of from the start of the pandemic, I'm sure you've discussed on here, Vietnam took a really aggressive reaction.
Yeah, I was there in March.
Oh, right. And I mean, for most of it, that worked really well. For much of the first 18 months of the pandemic, we largely we lived life kind of shockingly normally compared to a lot of other countries.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think, or at least it's believed the government reacted like this is because they knew the health system couldn't handle a huge outbreak. And we saw that in Ho Chi Minh City.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, they also converted a couple of huge kind of empty apartment complexes into gigantic, field hospitals with thousands of rooms. And I mean, I do want to clarify, not all of those rooms were like really sick people. Some of them actually were asymptomatic, which they eventually changed to kind of letting those people stay at home, which took some pressure off. But yeah, I mean, there was kind of an all hands on deck. Hanoi sent in a lot of doctors and medical workers. Other provinces did as well. The military sent in some doctors and, health reinforcements, for lack of a better word. So yeah, it was kind of a national effort, and also showed that if something like this had happened in numerous provinces, I mean, it would have been a really, really terrible situation. I mean, it is already, but I don't even want to think about what that would have been like.
Yeah. And, you're right. I think the industry and the manufacturing side of things was something that the government was particularly concerned about, because some of those places, they have workers of, tens of thousands.
Sure.
And I hear also that for their safety, they kind of put together kind of makeshift tents and things like that to actually keep them on the premises, to try and get them vaccinated. And I think slowly but surely, I think that's a strong government push, or that's what I'm hearing anyway, so that, that the country can, the wheels of the engine of the country can keep turning,
Yeah, they introduced, this was initially in the north, because this outbreak, we've almost forgotten it at this point, kind of first exploded in a few northern provinces way back in May.
Yes.
Especially a couple next to Hanoi, with a lot of Samsung factories and other major electronics manufacturers. And yeah, they kind of started this, or not kind of, they did start this 3 on the spot system, or also some people call it a bubble, where factories would set up living quarters, like tents, in spare warehouse
tent cities,
or whatever, so that employees could live, work, and also eat on site without leaving. And then they also did that down here, especially in Bin Yung and Dong Nai, which are huge industrial hubs. Yeah, I mean, the idea was to keep manufacturing going, and that worked for some places, but it didn't work for a lot. I mean, if a case got into a factory, that's like the perfect setting for Delta to spread, hundreds or thousands of people kind of close together.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. And also it's expensive, to house. I mean, a lot of them were at, half capacity or something, but still, if you need to feed 300 people 3 meals a day and also house them in addition to maintaining operations, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I know,
absolutely.
I know factories that tried it and gave up. Others just didn't even try to do it because they knew it was going to be too difficult. And some of that is relaxing now, because other provinces are also starting to come out of lockdown as well. But yeah, it was an interesting system. Worked for some, didn't work for others. But again, I mean, I think they obviously couldn't just shut everything down, because that would have been economically disastrous.
It also took a serious toll on the expat population for a number of reasons around getting access to the vaccine, or getting vaccine, or trying to get flights out. I know several Australians that, has cost them much more than you would normally pay to actually get out and get back. And then they were stuck in the lockdown so severely in Saigon that literally they had to get a PCR test to get on the plane, but then they couldn't get past the police that had cordoned off the area to get them through. And then they were worried about how they were going to get a grab car or whatever to the actual airport. So it's been quite stressful, I think, on lots of levels for the general population.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people who left, some permanently, some temporarily. I mean, my partner is American, and we talked about it a lot. And we have dogs, and we would have wanted to bring them with us, and it's really difficult to bring them into the U.S. It takes a few months of paperwork, so we stayed. But I mean, granted, the U.S. has kind of gone downhill again. But when it looked like things were getting better there was a lot of appeal, especially in the early days of this outbreak, when vaccine was almost non-existent. I mean, national rates nationally are still extremely low. It's only around 8% of the entire country is fully vaccinated. But here in Ho Chi Minh City, I mean, they've kind of funneled supply here because of the outbreak, and it's just such an important economic and population center. Now it's better. I'm fully vaccinated, luckily. So that kind of fear of not being vaccinated has waned, but certainly a lot of people left. And I mean, at the time, it made, if you could, get out and go somewhere more comfortable, then it definitely made sense.
Sure. So just kind of leading into now the weekend, talk from the government of Vietnam about lessening the restrictions coming up to the 1st of October. For us, sitting in the travel industry and kind of watching from the grandstands, we see this as a positive sign. And we'll get on to talk about Phu Quoc in a bit. But how do you see the 1st of October restrictions lessening? What will it mean for you?
Well, here in Ho Chi Minh City, it seems like, much to my surprise, it seems like it's going to mean a lot. I mean, I've been, given how conservative the restrictions have been thus far, I wasn't expecting anything too dramatic. And it's not confirmed yet. They're still working on the final policy, but it looks like for Ho Chi Minh City, I mean, they're going to allow, if you're fully or partially vaccinated, or if you've recovered from COVID within the last 6 weeks, I think, you'll basically be able to move around the city as you wish. They're removing checkpoints in between districts and neighborhoods. They're allowing, you can go back to supermarkets, convenience stores, you can get a haircut. You'll be able to, it sounds like you'll be able to exercise outside in quite large numbers if everyone is vaccinated, which that really surprises me.
Affecting all districts?
Yeah. I mean, I think there will still be some areas like, red zones are still going to be an issue potentially. But as far as I know, this is citywide. Weddings and funerals can happen again with, a set capacity. I mean, a lot of businesses will still be closed, like no in-person dining, no cinemas, no karaoke, no massage parlors, that kind of
bars.
Stuff. Yeah, no bars. And I think it also said street vendors are still going to be banned, which that's a real shame. I mean, again, those people are among the most impacted.
Markets?
And, I think markets are supposed to reopen as well, but a lot of it is going to be kind of probably just like see what the regulation is. And then there's been a lot of regulations during this lockdown that have been really unclear initially, and then they kind of gradually get clarified. But it looks like here a lot, like I'm very excited to be able to exercise out. Like I'm a pretty avid cyclist, and I've got an indoor trainer, luckily, but that's not the same as riding outside.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it looks like a lot could change. Of course, the economic damage is still going to be immense. I mean, fully vaccinated rates for the city are still relatively low. A lot of businesses it's still going to be expensive to go back to work. Food ingredient prices are high because there's been a lot of shipping issues between provinces.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
And also, as we said, a lot of people left. Like we don't even know how many people left, but presumably many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. And a lot of those individuals are kind of like the labor force of the city. And it's not, some of them, they can't come back yet because there's still travel restrictions, or a lot might not want to, unless they have like a guaranteed job, maybe they would. But it's going to be pretty interesting to see. And also just what businesses survived, being closed for 3, 4, 5 months. Not everyone obviously has the liquidity to just sit there with no business for that amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll be interested to just see what the hotel industry does.
Yeah.
All of those empty hotels with hotel staff, did those hotel staff go back home, as I said, to those rural areas and kind of wait it out? And are they going to have the manpower to put back into it?
Sure. Well, and of course, even before this, I mean, obviously, as you know, there was no international tourism anyway. So certainly the hotel's more focused on the international market. I mean, everyone had to pivot by this point to some extent, but this was obviously just more pain on top of that. I mean, for travel, honestly, it's going to be tough. I see that as being pretty low down the totem pole of priorities, certainly for here. I mean, we'll get to this, the discussions of FUWalk doing some sort of opening for internationally, but there's still, I'm sure there's closed doors discussions, but publicly there's still no discussion whatsoever of resuming any kind of normal inbound international flights, whether for business or even just citizens wanting to return to the country still. It's still these sometimes government arranged repatriation flights, although those haven't happened in a while, or these charter flights where it's, everything's booked and approved in advance, and it's really expensive and you have to do quarantine. So in terms of travel, it still seems like that's going to be a long, long ways off. I mean, domestic travel is going to be an issue as well, just because the rest of the country is so unvaccinated, not by choice.
Yeah, that's what I'm keen to say.
Such little supply. I mean, there's definitely a push from domestic, travel companies and the domestic airlines and domestic hotels, because everyone's, flat on their back right now financially, and they're really pushing to try to get, some sort of green pass system set up for domestic travel, which would help, but that's, again, only 8% of the population right now. So that's a pretty limited pool to work with. Yeah. So just getting domestic, because what happens if, you're vaccinated, you can still be carrying the virus. What happens if a group of vaccinated visitors from Ho Chi Minh City go to, Lao Cai province or something where it's much, much less vaccinated, and then an outbreak starts there? Obviously, that's what officials are thinking about. This reopening is, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens because presumably cases here in the city will rise when they reopen, just because there's going to be more interaction between people. But how do they react to that? Mm-hmm. It's interesting watching Singapore, which is very heavily vaccinated now, and they're kind of going back into some restrictions with their cases increasing. So I don't know. We have to see. There's been a lot of talk recently about living with the virus, but we don't know what that's going to mean in practice once. And there will be cases, but what happens when that does happen?
If I talk to people in the UK and some parts of Europe that are, vagrantly travelling and getting about the world, they're still getting thousands of cases a day.
Sure.
Freedom Day for them wasn't freedom from the actual virus. It was just freedom to move around and take the risk that you will, and I was talking to one journalist the other day. He was saying that it doesn't even appear in the news in the UK anymore. Like they don't publish all the numbers, and they don't the caseload or anything. And he said, everything from my daughter's birthday party where someone rang us up afterwards and said, oh, look, one kid tested positive after the party, but, we don't think it's going to be a problem. She's only got a bit of a sniffle, and, they're just calling it a bad flu rather than, a deadly disease now. So I wonder whether or not, and Australia is kind of heading in the same direction, whether or not we'll see the same things, because, you've got major airlines that are sitting around going broke. If we don't get the domestic travel going again in Vietnam. And I think Vietnam will need to test it internally to see how it goes before there's any sign of international. So it's got to start somewhere. And, you're going to be coming up to, the wet season in the north and the cold in January, February. So, these next 3 to 6 months are going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's going to be so regionally varied, even within Vietnam. Because we're still averaging around 5,000 cases a day. The number of severe cases and deaths has dropped, so those are the really key indicators. But by pure numbers, we're still having a ton of cases. I think most days over half. The city accounts for over half of all cases in the country, that detected cases. We don't always know what kind of testing is going on in all the provinces, but so we're going to be living with the virus, quote unquote, with that many cases. But Hanoi had no cases in the last 24 hours. So if they were to get to 5,000 cases, that would be unthinkable compared to where they're at right now. So we don't even know what it's going to be like from region to region within the country.
Absolutely. And, you know, it may mean that the travel regions will stay within. So in other words, you might fly from Hanoi to Dong Hoi or somewhere like that, but you won't go any further south.
Right.
Or you might fly to Da Nang and stay in, you know, central and north. I don't know, is there a big appetite for, you know, for travel by people in Saigon? Do people want to get back out there and people have a holiday?
Yeah, I mean, people in my social circle certainly do. I'm pretty on the fence about it for the foreseeable future. Just not that I'm worried about getting sick particularly, but just, you know, knowing that other provinces are far less vaccinated. So, yeah, I mean, certainly there are, I don't know about the average person, but of course there's got to be some level of pent up demand. I mean, we had a national holiday at the start of the month that, you know, we couldn't do anything for it. And people do, you know, we have a limited number of national holidays. So usually when they happen, people like to do some sort of, even if it's just going to Vung Tau from Ho Chi Minh City, you know, just a couple hours away, something to get out of the city. Or if you're in Hanoi, same thing. And that people weren't able to do that. So there definitely will be some pent up demand. And also a lot of people are just going to want to go see their family.
They're painting the Phu Quoc Island as the, you know, the sandbox for Vietnam. I mean, I've had lots of different interviews with a range of different people, and, you know, there's really a mixed bag on whether or not it's going to take off. You know, it's already been pushed back from October to November.
Yeah.
You know, what I know about the island, it's about 160,000 people. You know, I've only been twice for very short visits. It doesn't have a its medical situation is not expansive, but I don't know. Do you think it's going to come off, or?
I mean, at this point, I think it will happen simply because they say it's going to happen. I mean, the prime minister himself has like given it the green light, so I think it kind of has to happen. Just because the highest levels of government have said this is going to be a thing. I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but I can't see it being a huge success. And I've seen some articles where they say they're expecting, you know, tens of thousands of visitors a month. I don't know if that includes domestic, because then maybe, but I can't see this having a huge amount of appeal for a lot of international visitors. I mean, having to pay for a charter flight, I think the system is largely you just stay at the resort that you go to,
yes,
and don't leave. Of course, for some people, that kind of trip may have appeal. But I mean, I think a lot of Westerners who come to Vietnam want to see some of the country as well, or at least, you know, even if it's kind of a tacky night market tour or something like that, is at least getting you out of the resort and eating some semblance of local food. If you can't do any of that, I don't really know who's going to be jumping at, you know, really wanting to do that. And also it has, I mean, some of this seems to be pitched as like huge benefit for the local economy, but if you're just staying at whatever the Intercontinental for 7 days, like that's not, I mean, that'll help the people working for the resort, but the local economy is not really going to get much of a boost from that at all.
Yeah. It's a difficult one. I think it's a test case that they want to exercise to just see the manpower handling. I heard some numbers posed that might start at maybe 2,000 to 3,000 coming in. Russia is a country in particular that is very keen on the island and finds the island very popular.
Yeah.
You know, it's got great water sports, with sailing and diving and things like that. The Vin Pearl group is very big there. It's kind of got like a a mini Venice with the cable cars and it's it's nothing like Vietnam, but
No.
it's out there. And depending, as you say, I think because the Prime Minister has put that out there, I think it's probably going to happen in a fashion.
Yeah.
How well or how successful it is, it's time to come. I think there is an aim for the country to try and get on top of things for Tet.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you know, at Tet, the country just moves around in big numbers because they're all going home. So I can see that there'll be a really big push, and that's February. So what have we got? October, November, December, January. So we've got 5 months to, for Vietnam to.
Yeah. I mean, Tet's obviously going to be huge. The Tet this year or earlier this year, there were a couple small flare-ups happening at the time. So a lot of people still traveled, but a lot of people actually canceled their trips. So that's if somebody goes 2 years without being able to do something for Tet, that's going to be a really big deal. Again, I don't mean like traveling for fun. That's like the one time of the year that lots of families get together, multiple generations, and it's really, really important. It's like missing Christmas or something like that in the West. Yeah, I mean, Phu Quoc is interesting. I mean, you can definitely tell there's something of like a regional arms race isn't a good phrase, but just like a tourism competition. Vietnam, Indonesia, everybody is now saying that Thailand has the Phuket sandbox, which I don't follow closely, but I believe has been a bit of a mixed bag in terms of
it
success.
Hasn't gone well either.
Yeah,
exactly.
But they all want to try. I mean, you see Bali, named a lot as well. I'm sure there's other places I'm missing. So nobody wants to be last to get something like that off the ground, I guess, even if it has a pretty minimal impact. But yeah, I mean, the main reason Phu Quoc was pushed back was, again, vaccine supply. And I mean, who knows if they'll be able to get there by November. Could definitely see that being pushed again. But I do see it happening again, just because there's been so much high level discussion. And I mean, now there's talk of, Can Hoa province, where Nha Trang is also starting to talk about this as well. Similar, coming in on charter flights and just staying sequestered at a resort, which, I mean, you mentioned Russia. I guess that does make sense as a market because I think that's kind of probably has a lot of appeal. Go to the beach for 7 days and just sit in one place. Again, that can certainly be appealing, but a lot of people are also going to be put off by, you mean I can't leave the resort, like even to have a meal outside or something like that? Well, why would I spend whatever thousands of dollars
and not be able to go to the mainland,
right? Yeah,
to see the rest of Vietnam, where the rest of Vietnam lives.
Yeah. I mean, something will definitely happen. I will be curious to see what they do with domestic tourism at the same time. But yeah, Phu Quoc, I mean, two of the most powerful domestic tourism, real estate companies have huge properties there, as you mentioned. So I'm sure they're pushing really hard because they have thousands of rooms that have been sitting empty.
I have a feeling that Hoi An and Da Nang will also find themselves wanting to trial something, because the old town is just a ghost town.
I've heard it's really sad, yeah. And I mean, Da Nang, I like Da Nang a lot, and it's important domestic tourism destination, but has really gotten big. I know with Korean visitors and probably Japanese visitors as well in recent years. So that that would make sense for them to want to try something similar as well. And if they stick with the sequestered resort setup, there's a ton of huge resorts there, so that could work. But again, who's going to want to? I guess I could see them kind of targeting like individual, like I know, not to stereotype, but a lot of Koreans go to visit Da Nang to play golf. So if it was like you can stay at the resort and just play golf and that's it, I'm sure a lot of people would probably go for that actually. But again, and it's pretty limited economic impact on the the broader city when you did something like that.
Yeah, it might be kind of dolly steps in the whole country opening up, and it might be these little pockets of experiences.
Yeah,
That,
I mean, I can't really see just like your average tourist being able to get on a plane, a normal flight to Vietnam, and then being able to travel as they please until second half of 2022, like maybe later later in that time period. I mean, we don't even know when people are going to be able to come back just like to live here or to do business
work.
here. So yeah, it's going to be a while, I would think.
You answered my last question, Michael. It was going to be when do you think or you feel like Vietnam will be open to? Because I mean, I used to spend 2 or 3 months a year in Vietnam and in various times during the year. So I was there in March. I got out just in time before Australia shut the doors. So I haven't been back since 2020.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. But as you say, it's going to be a serious consideration for highly vaccinated countries to consider coming to a low vaccinated country.
Yeah.
And then, Vietnam, will they review their visa requirements? There could be a whole change in just, what boxes you've got to tick.
Yeah, we don't know
to get in.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the government has said that they're aiming to fully vaccinate 70% of the population by March or April of next year. I mean,
that's a big number.
Yeah, I mean, which is a long ways off. It's a lot of people. I mean, there's not really vaccine. There's some vaccine hesitancy, but it's not like you have in the U.S. or somewhere like that. So it's not really. I think if they have the supply, they should be able to hit those numbers. But
it'll be getting to some of them in the rural areas will be the tough ones.
But I don't think they're going to want anyone moving around the country from elsewhere, moving around the country freely before they at least hit that. I mean, of course, our understanding of the virus could change. I mean, the new variants could still break out for all we know. So a lot could certainly happen. But given that timeline, I can't see any kind of, free travel happening until easily the second half of next year.
Well, that wasn't kind of the best note to finish on, but
yeah, unfortunately.
But it might be the reality that we need to face in Vietnam at the moment. And I certainly appreciate where you're sitting in the thick of it when you're just going to be able to open up, take your dogs out, and go for a run. That must be wonderful to be able to do that. But I just think of all those restaurants and bars and just the buzz of that city. I just to be closed, it just must be an eyesore. I just can't imagine it. I see the photo, just can't imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest, I've only seen photos recently. I mean, I haven't left my neighborhood in almost 3 months. But I think on Friday or early next week, I'll probably just do a long drive, assuming that is allowed, a long drive around the city just to kind of see what it looks like, because there's a lot of places I haven't seen in months, which is quite strange to kind of say out loud.
Yeah, sure. Look, Michael, I really appreciate you coming on the program and just great to get your insights into, how things have been, where we're at and what the future holds for travellers.
Yeah,
we do want to come back. It's a great country and there's so much to see and do. And I think,
there really is.
Yeah, we just want it to be a healthy country where it feels safe to do so.
Yeah, we're all hoping for that at this stage.
Okay, Michael, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Check out the episode notes for more information.
What about Vietnam?
Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review, and stay tuned for more fun adventures in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?